Welcome, everyone, to our breakout panel, How Global Leaders Automate Defense at Hyperscale. My name is Tim Peacock. I'm one of the product managers on Google SecOps. I've been in the company almost 8 years, and I've worked across a bunch of different parts of our product, including lately on our agentic capabilities. Delighted to have these three fine folks joining me on the panel today. We're joined by Jeremiah Kung, the CISO at AppLovin. We've got Alex Pabst, a deputy CISO at Allianz, and Pete Miller, Senior Director of InfoSec at Ford. Today, we're going to talk about the evolution of the role of the CISO in light of AI, the changes in our industry driven by AI, and we're going to hopefully talk about how you all can go from being the guy that says no to the guy that makes the business work in the new way. If you are a CISO at a security org, I think this is going to be a relevant panel for you. If you're working for a CISO at a company, this is going to be a relevant panel for you. And so before we get started, could you guys share a little bit about your respective companies and your approach to AI? Because when we were getting ready for this, I got really different stories of what security means at each of your companies. Sure. So maybe tell us the story about the 2 a.m. problem you had.
Well, no. So basically at AppLovin, we're an AI company, neural network, very advanced stuff. So for us, the attitude is use AI or you will fall behind. Right? So it's very different than working at a bank or a large industry, which I've done before. So enablement's kind of the direction we want to go, absolutely.
Yeah, and we're the exact opposite. We are the large bank, or well, in our case, a large insurer. We're active across 72 countries, so we have, I think, 120-something regulators around the world, so we are very risk-averse. At the same time, we're also having to embrace AI at speed because we don't want to fall behind.
And Ford is probably somewhere in the middle. We're a 150-year-old company. We've built a lot of our own technical solutions, so trying to wrangle those things in and get it to a point where the company can better leverage AI to assist the business and certainly to assist our security teams.
So what I love about these three companies is they represent such different approaches to AI, to risk, and to how they do their business. And so, AppLovin, you're mostly a GCP shop, is that right?
100% GCP shop, yep.
100%?
Yep.
I love that. Ford, you're?
Mostly GCP.
Allianz?
Zero GCP.
Zero GCP.
Get out.
So again, we've gone for a mix of perspectives on this panel, and we really wanted to get that energy of a couple of CISOs disagreeing with each other. And so maybe I'll ask our first question, and we could get maybe to the slide that has our faces on it, so you know who's saying what. I forgot to grab the clicker before I came over here.
Yeah.
End of the first.
Fixed it.
So, next slide, please.
We're good.
Oh, they got it. Oh, no, the previous one. That one. That's what we want. So, I want to talk about risk and being CISOs. You deal with risk all day. That's your job. What's the bigger risk in 2026? Dangerous adoption of AI or blocking adoption of AI? Which is a bigger existential risk to your business?
I say it's both. Actually, blocking is probably the bigger one because you could be as secure as you want, but if you're out of business, that's also very secure, but you're not going to be very profitable, right? So you got to partner with the folks and help them use it securely, try to manage the chaos. If you tell them no too much, they're just going to do it themselves somewhere behind the scenes. Now you don't know what's happening.
That's like children too, isn't it?
It's, yeah, I could see that, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you get into that mode with people? What are you guys doing to bring out this collaborative AI adoption journey?
Yeah, I think great points. Shadow AI might be the biggest risk of them all. So by blocking, because it's going to happen, it's already happening, you're going to force your users to go out and come up with creative solutions on their own, minus guardrails, minus any governance. And then you literally have no idea what's happening. So I think implementing it in a safe manner, enabling your business to be able to utilize AI in a safe manner, because they're going to need it. And if you try and block it, you're going to get a lot of resistance. Probably be one of the most disliked IT professionals in the company, and you're going to hurt the business.
Yeah, so we're the risk-averse ones, right? So we started with blocking. Our approach is to basically make alternatives available internally, right? So for us, I don't know, ChatGPT came out, we blocked it. We kind of built our own internal version that's called Allianz GPT, which still runs on the same models, but it means we can control where the data goes, right? So for us, we have a lot of PII There are a lot of health data and all those things that we really, really, really do not want to see in public. So that's why we're incredibly careful with what people put into public models. That being said, we caught a bunch of people trying to install OpenClaw or ClawBot or whatever it's called these days, right? So people do try. We're still at the point of where we're trying to rein it in and allow things that we can control to a certain extent.
I heard a story about a head of AI who was at a company kind of like yours, not yours, I'm not saying it happened at Allianz. Head of AI had 2 laptops on their desk. One was the corp laptop on which all AI platforms and tools were blocked, and one was their personal laptop that they took to the office so they could do AI. And this was the head of AI for this company. That's the world that we get into when we are the security team that says no.
Right.
So I want to also talk about the coming risk with AI. And I'm sure everybody here has heard about the Mythos moment. And if you haven't, this is not the panel for you. How are you getting ready for this? Like, one of the things Anton and I talk about is the speed of patching. Are you going to patch faster as a result of Mythos, or are you not? And what are you doing to get ready?
Well, like anything with patching, you have to basically understand what the risk is and understand your attack surface. So we're very lucky at AppLovin. We understand our attack surface as best we can. Being 100% Google shop, I could see certainly being multi-cloud, on-prem, this and that, much harder to understand where everything's coming from and where the attacks are coming from. But for me, it's, like what Bruce Lee said, be like water. You got to be adaptable. You got to understand where the attacks are coming from. It happens. When the internet first came out, everyone says, don't use the internet. And of course, it's standard today. Same thing with cloud. Don't use the cloud. I don't want that guy having my data. But now it's a standard of living. So we're in the early stages. You got to keep an eye out, but you got to be adaptable.
Yeah, attack surface management is certainly key. You need to really make sure you have an understanding of what that looks like, what the threat actors can see. Are we going to get faster at patching? We have to get faster at patching. I mean, the world saw a 3 days drop over a period of 2 days last week. Pretty rare for that to happen. We expect to continue to see that trend. The threat actors are just moving so fast now, and they can identify vulnerabilities faster than they ever have been. And I think we're seeing about, you used to see 2 weeks before a vulnerability before an active threat was out in the wild. Now, probably about 2 days you should expect. So just if you look at it through that lens alone, that's enough to tell you need to operate differently than you're operating today. And I met with my vulnerability team on Monday, and the answer is not more bodies. You really have to think about your operation differently. You have to ensure that, again, you've got a good grasp of your attack surface management. You're utilizing threat intelligence to the extent that you can to identify what the threat actors are doing, understanding those TTPs, ensuring that you have layered defenses, and those layered defenses are accounting for what your intel and your vulnerability management teams are finding.
Yeah, I mean, we're, I think, 125 years old as Allianz. Our IT is as old in parts, it feels like. So faster patching is not possible, right? So I don't know if it was Anton or you, but someone talked about the sound barrier of patching.
Yes.
Right? So it's like there's a certain speed at which you can physically do this. There's no way you can reboot all your servers 17 times a day because you run into problems, unless you run on a modern cloud, which we don't. We still have a mainframe. So for us, there's multiple aspects to that, right? You need to manage legacy, right? And for us, that means standardizing on modern platforms, decommissioning stuff, deprecating old software, because we can't patch that anymore. We can't handle the complexity. The good thing is, I'm hoping, and we had a session with Heather Atkins before, the CISO of Google, we're going to go through a valley of tears, right? So we're going to see a lot of drama on vulnerabilities and whatever. The good thing is we'll hopefully come out the other end with actually secure software.
And actually, one thing that's been helping me, and Pete, this is something you want to consider too, with SecOps, is the integration with the threat intelligence. So you still have to monitor whether we're going to patch or not patch and understand the risk. But the threat intelligence piece is really handy because now you can see if you're actually being under attack or is it just the noise of the internet. And that's very helpful to do that chaining.
Right.
The debate I'm having with Anton right now is patch speed, which for most organizations has not gotten faster in 30 years, a sound barrier or a speed of light barrier. And a sound barrier can be overcome. Chuck Yeager managed to fly a plane faster than the speed of sound and landed afterwards. Only Captains Picard and Kirk can go faster than the speed of light. And so is the question, are we in a world where we're going to have that engineering and scientific and the right stuff breakthrough to patch faster, or are we fundamentally limited by the laws of IT physics?
You know, I think you get both answers on the table there. With AI agents, you could get it into a place, not yet, but you could get into a place where the patching comes and passes the warp speed, right? And so that would be interesting. But right now, it's definitely a sound barrier. You have to do checks in place.
Yeah, I think you have to understand the appetite for risk within your organization, because that's really what it's all about when we're talking about patching. There are certain assets that you would say, get it right 80% of the time. That 20% of the time you're wrong, ensure you have a way to back that out so you can resume business. There's other parts of your business. If you're a manufacturing company, for example, you got to be right more than 80% of the time. So you can accelerate some parts of the business potentially and be more conservative in other parts of the business.
I recently had a conversation with a petroleum refiner, and I realized that if they get patching wrong, things will explode, literally, because they will screw up their industrial process. And so for a manufacturer, I imagine you have a similar set of constraints.
Be a little more
conservative. Piling up on a production line.
Right.
You mentioned TI as something you're incorporating to make your DNR better in the Mythos moment. What else are you thinking beyond patch faster for response in the Mythos world?
Yeah, so we've also used the SOAR to some certain degrees of success. Again, we still have the human piece because you don't want to take things down, so that's something you have to be careful for. I think what also really helps there is the dashboard, which before last year was still 3 different tools. Now we have the unified, which is much nicer, so we don't want to rage quit when we're at our desktop to have to log into 3 different places. But you get a general sense of what the numbers look like and where the attacks are and where the weak spots are, and what we really need to work on. So it's a lot easier than it was before.
So general DNR maturity.
General, yeah, I would say.
I mean, continuing that journey, right? So I think the other thing is actually using agentic in your SOC, right? Because like we'll see alerts from our EDR tooling or Wiz tooling or whatever we have, and we'll see so many more alerts that humans, at least for us, are like we've got great analysts in the SOC, yes, but I can't scale them. Like I can't hire 50% year over year more, right? So we need to go the agentic route, and that's going to help us, you know, with ETI data behind it, identify what's a priority. Ideally, if you have the workflows right, either isolate that, fix it, patch it, whatever you can do behind it in an automated way. And that's something that I think will help us get rid of some of that valley of tears. I think we'll also still see incidents, right? So it's not about patching, it's about business resilience in the end to make sure you can survive whatever happens.
Valley of tears, that's a little depressing.
Well, for CISOs or for security orgs, it's going to be an interesting few months or years or years. I don't know.
Pete, do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think if your organization currently uses a lot of orchestration, then that journey for you to get to the point where you're ready to use agentic AI is going to be a little bit easier because there's a lot of similarities in that you don't have a body there making that change or preventing that threat actor. But yeah, certainly getting to the point where you can use agentic is probably going to be a must because we're again, the speed and the volume of what we're seeing from the threat actors is such that you just can't operate your SOC the way you operated it yesterday.
We saw in our Mandiant report this year a shift in initial access to ransomware operator handoff getting down to 23 seconds in many cases. So from the moment that the initial access actor achieves access to an environment, phishing, voice phishing, OAuth token compromise, to when they're dropping the second stage and handing off to the ransomware gangs, 23 seconds. So your DNR tooling is good for that, right? You guys are not worried about that?
Well, you only hear about the stories that fail, right? You never hear about the stories that win.
It's true. Are there good stories that won? Can we tell a good story, not a Valley of Tears story?
Not in public places, I can tell you right now, yeah.
But the agentic stuff is helping.
Yes, absolutely. So to speak a little bit about it, Shiny Hunters is pretty on top of that, right? When it comes to attack patterns, they even announced they were attacking us at some point. And thanks to the great work of our tools that we use at Inhibit AI and Tani, who's in the audience here, who took down, they had no domains to work from because we already burned them to the ground. So
Really?
yeah, so they had to resort on texting and phishing calls, right? So yeah.
I like that. So I also want to talk about the automation you referred to. And one of the things I see coming with agentic automation is how do we build that trust and expand what I'm calling the agentic automation Overton window? You know, how do we expand the acceptable set of things we let the agents do?
Yeah, I think you start with a risk-based approach. You know, we talked a little while ago about certain parts of the business you can accept more risk. Other parts you need to be very risk adverse. So I think if you start with a risk-based approach, that helps you start to push the envelope a little bit forward. The interesting thing about agentic is I don't know that there's a real good identity solution out there in how these agents are going to get this access. You know, one thought is they just become another user in your AD. Well, now your AD's got, you know, 10 times the amount of accounts in it that it had before. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done in that space of identity for agentic.
I think trust is a very good point, right? There's two levels of trust for me. One is what your organization trusts, and then for us it's also what the regulator trusts. Because in the end, and I was joking about this in another session before, we'll never get to a fully autonomous SOC. There will always be at least one human because the regulator needs someone to fire or put in jail. Maybe, you know, yeah. Let's hope that's not the only reason we need that person. But no, so for us, we like you're right with like you need to look at the risk appetite. For us and Lars, who's in the audience here, did something very smart. We basically ran the agentic triage agent in parallel to what our humans did, and then ended up comparing the results. And that kind of gave us the confidence that the agentic solution can do at least what the humans can do. Interesting enough, what we saw is that because it consistently looks at every case in a very thorough way, the results were actually more accurate, what we're seeing from the agentic side. And that internally gives me more peace of mind that we're not going to miss something major. And we're going to build from there, right? So it's going to start as an L1 analyst, and an L1 analyst cannot isolate all the servers at the same time, right? But it's going to work its way up.
Yeah, we're seeing it from the different direction because of our teams using it so much. We're actually seeing the agentic AI starting to behave in ways because they're desperately looking to find an answer. So they'll start taking shortcuts and hacking behaviors. And you're like, well, that starts to set off red flags. So luckily our SecOps is set up correctly, so we're flagging these things and chasing it down. But that's something we probably want to put stronger guardrails on at some point because as the AI gets more and more, I don't want to say aggressive, but more efficient or more processing power to try to solve things, they're going to go outside the box, just like kind of like a fresh out of college intern is like, oh, you know, I could probably, you know, hack my way around that, right? Same idea when I was in my Tesla. But the first time I did the full self-drive, I felt like my daughter was driving, you know, for the first time. I was like, oh, Jesus, please don't do this. So yeah, it'll get there probably, but I think right now you got to keep an eye on it. And the SecOps does help with that a lot.
So I asked in a different forum yesterday, you know, how are security leaders preparing for incredibly productive yet very naive teammates to join their team? And one of my colleagues, without missing a beat, said, Tim, don't worry, we deal with you just fine. And so I'm curious, how are you thinking about the influence of the agents on your SOC dynamics? I mean, the thing that they don't get bored or tired or frustrated by repetitive cases, that's great. But how are they going to change the dynamics of your teams?
I think Alex brought up a good point about the L1. I mean, that's another good way to push forward on agentic is having AI essentially replace the work, not the people, but the work that those L1 analysts are doing today. So things like triage of the alerts. If you feel comfortable, you can use agentic AI to do whatever that next step was, or you just take that and automatically move it to L2. They're presented with everything they need to know. They push the button if they concur that whatever needs to happen happens. But I think it's important when you look at the team dynamics, and that's why I specified replace the work, not the people. because there's plenty of other work that needs to be done. You know,
In a SOC, no way.
there's purple teaming that could be done. There's more proactive, right? Think about an L1 today. They're 100% reactive. If you could take those resources, upskill them, or maybe you don't even have to upskill them, to be more proactively dealing with the vulnerabilities and things like that.
So a similar approach for us, right? Basically, we're using the agentic features built into SecOps. We can now see that an L1 can do a lot of stuff that they couldn't do before, just because they can now write the query in natural language and they don't have to look through, I don't know, Jara rules or whatever. And that's what we're seeing, right? So we're seeing more of the boring, repetitive, bore out or burn out work being done by agentic AI. And we can then up-level kind of the L1s to an L2 or something, or use them in other places, right? So if they're excited about other stuff, that's also a good opportunity to do it. And in the past, like at least us as a very traditional company, we could never hire the amount of resources or the quality resources that we needed, just because they weren't in the market or we didn't want to, could not or did not want to pay for them.
That's one of the other things I'm really excited about with the agentic capabilities is bringing skills to SOCs that weren't present before. So with things like the threat hunt agent or the malware reverse engineering agent, really, it's hard to hire malware reverse engineers. And frankly, in many cases, you don't want to hire them. They listen to weird music and sit in dark rooms, and they're prickly. But Gemini can reverse engineer binaries in seconds, and so we have now created this capability that literally anybody can access to extract IOCs from binaries, classify binaries, and it's an incredible upskill that we've just created for the world.
Yeah, I was talking to Pete about that earlier. So detection engineers, right, they're a weird lot, right? So
Yes,
you
they
hire them, I just do detection engineering all day. Well, if all you're doing is building detection rules, you're going to find a lot of rules that just fire on stuff, whether it's at risk or it's helpful or not so great. This is, again, where agentic AI helps. Using a tool like that can help you build better rules, make sure your rules you have built are actually working or efficient or pulling up things that you want. So that saves a lot of time and get engineers time back on their date. I find right now, maybe it'll be different. AI is a perfect partner to work with the human piece. You know, maybe someday it'll take it over. We'll see. But right now, I see it as something that we can use. I mean, AppLovin famously runs lean, so we don't have the joy of having, you know, waves and waves of people. Sounds like you guys too, of looking at stuff. So we have to rely on these tools.
Yeah, so there's a beautiful side effect to all of this, right? Because like we joked about it on the podcast, right? You can turn up the squelch, right? You can put a lot more data into your pipeline and have a lot more things looked at. So for now, like we probably look at 4 or 5 malware samples a year, because it means getting Mandiant in, paying them a lot of money. It takes a week for them to get a result back to us. If we can now throw that into the malware analysis agent, we can just throw every single piece of malware that we get into that, and we get results. And that's actually pretty cool additional data that we have in the SOC available to make decisions on.
That's very cool. One of the things I want to pick at here is you're talking a lot about the Google agentic capacity, which I love because I build that stuff. Have you thought about building your own agentic capacity, and how are you thinking about the trade-off between buying from us versus building your own in-house?
Yeah, we're doing it now. We're messing with it right now. Yeah, it's not full release, but we're looking at that and the evaluations of that. Partnering with Google as well on that's been helpful because you guys actually listen and have feedback to make changes.
We try.
Yeah, some companies do, some companies not so much. But you guys have been great about that. But yeah, you can't help but start playing with it yourself and seeing what you come up with. And that does, if you're a vuln management company, you might have to be, you know, a little bit on the lookout.
Yeah, we take a hybrid approach. Obviously, we work with our suppliers, and we build our own. A really good use case for building our own, in my experience, was our red team. Mm-hmm. So they're using AI to execute campaigns. That they're pretty good, so it might have taken them, you know, a week to write that before, and now they're just flying out the door.
And is that, sorry to ask kind of a not the nicest question, but is that changing things? Like, sure, we're doing more red teaming, but what got better as a result of doing more red teaming than we were doing before?
Yeah, it is changing things. We're finding more areas of concern. They, through this process, have started, you talked about the weird music and the
Yeah.
dark, that's them. They're in the dark room they started coming out and integrating with the rest of the
Is that a good thing?
It's a good thing. It's
Sorry,
a good
this is the craziest thing I've heard all day. Next.
Yeah, they get excited about it, and they're excited to share what they're doing with the other teams and try and help them.
How is Allianz thinking about build their own versus, and is build your own constrained by one of or many of your 125 regulators?
No, so build your own is not constrained. Well, there's the EU AI Act and lots of other stuff that constrains many things, but for us the constraint is really that we're not naturally a software company. So we're a risk management, risk pricing company. That's where we're good at. We're not very good at building and maintaining software ourselves. We do it. It has its own problems, but for us it's really, we try to buy before we make. Because it's the overhead of maintaining stuff is not there, plus we don't have the skills in the SOC or the security area to really build code yet.
And it changes tomorrow, whatever you build. Right?
Yeah.
That's another interesting thing I've observed as a builder of products is it used to be that if you had a working demo, that meant you were about 80% of the way there. With AI, you can have a working demo and you're 0% of the way there. Because when you get things into production with the diversity of customer data, if you have not done a good job of hill climbing, you're going to have a very bad day when something meets the enemy for the first time.
Yeah.
So it's both easier than ever and harder than ever, I think, to build reliable software at scale. This is a panel. You're meant to answer the questions, not me. So I want to ask another thing, which is how is this changing your metrics? How is this changing the things that you measure? How is this changing the things that you report? Because I suspect those are also different things.
Yeah.
It's just a different story to tell at the end of the day, right? I'm not a big fan of just measuring numbers for numbers' sake and volume metrics. You do want to keep an eye on it just to see if it makes sense for workload, but reporting up to the board and other types of execs, you really want to tell the story of what the risk is. So if we're saying, hey, we're going to start using this tool across the enterprise, that's great. I see a lot of business potential here, but we're accepting some risk, and here's what the risks are and what we're going to do to mitigate it. That's the better way to go. So for me, it's not a matter of metrics, it's a matter of the different story you're telling, because now it's telling the story of what are you guys doing.
Right.
I think that, like, you're absolutely right? So the story changes. I mean, mean time to detect, that's never really been a useful metric because you basically measure how good the tools are that you bought, right? There's mean time to respond, which just incentivizes your SOC to close every case and say, we're done, or we looked at it, right? So what we're looking at, there's two sides of metrics. There's the metrics you report to the board, which is really risk-based, like where are we at? And there's the internal things we measure, like, hey, what's our automation rate? What's straight-through processing? What's like all those things that internally help us to get better, but that the board either doesn't necessarily understand or care about because they probably want to know what the risk is, right? They don't care how much you've automated in the end.
Yeah, it's much better at a personal level, right? I guess my mic's out, so I'll talk really loud. But a good example is on our IT side, our metrics go, hey, 83% of our tickets are coming from Windows machines, which is only 13% of our environment. What's up with that, right? So you can kind of start looking at that, but the board's not going to care about that.
They don't care about that at all.
Yeah.
Like zero. They're already asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really
Turn off.
Oh, we're gonna do this live. This is great. Oh, I think you fixed it.
There you go.
Wow. Pete, how is this changing? Yeah, a round of applause, please.
The key is you just turn it off and turn it back on. Works every time.
I don't recommend that as an incident response strategy.
It works 80% of the time.
Pete, how's it changing for your org?
I agree with the mean time to detect, mean time to respond, if those numbers are already good.
Fair point.
If the numbers aren't so good, then that's part of the story you can tell.
Yeah.
We were making a number up, 20 days. We did this AI thing, and now we're 5 days. That's a good story. If you're 2 days and you get down to, 1.5 days, the line doesn't really move. Nobody really wants to hear about that. So it really depends on your current environment and what your current metrics look like. One other area we're looking at changing is we have vulnerability management governance, and there's SLAs assigned to the teams if they get a vulnerability, reducing those times, reducing the SLA times. So if they had 3 weeks before, start paring that down to 2 weeks and forcing them to react a little bit faster.
Nice. Okay, so
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say you have to be careful with those types of metrics. Again, humans, just like AI agents, get clever. I was at a company, a financial institution company, where the help desk says you have to answer the call and complete it in 5 minutes. So what they would do is at 4:59, they'd hang up the phone and then, okay, call me back, right? And that's how they would kind of game the system a little bit.
Wow.
So it's metrics like that don't always work.
And they get another call.
Right, exactly, yeah.
there's a management law about this, that when a metric becomes a goal, it's no longer a useful metric.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think is next for agentic in your DNR world? Where are you excited about seeing this go? What's the next big thing for you all here?
I mean, we've started with the simple things, which to us is like the triage, which with the data that's there, it's the malware analysis where you have the data. I think what we're looking to is actually the investigations. And the hard part for us is making sure that all the data is available to the agents. Right, so triage is easy. You look at the signals that are there, you do some enrichment. If you think about a full investigation, it means being able to, in an agentic way, pull files from a system, maybe even ask the user questions, right? So just get more information around it to make a decision on that case. I think that's what we're looking at moving to, but it's going to be harder than the stuff we've done so far, just because you need to pull more data in.
Yeah.
As an aside, and this is out of the script, so feel free for these guys not to answer it. Do you think that agentic investigation is going to change how you think about data centralization versus data federation? Do you think it will push you more towards putting things into your SIM, or do you think it will push you more towards leaving things where they are and letting the agents call out to various systems?
Well, I know you guys would like if we push it to the SIM because you could charge us a lot more. So.
I ask because I have an earnest belief that charge you more is not in alignment of our interests.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out earnestly, like, as we as an industry change, as these tools can do the swivel chair incident response without being in a swivel chair, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. That's an interesting point to that for the agentic piece, because right now the idea is put all the data, all the important signals in one spot. It's just easier to catch.
And that's been the idea for 20 years.
You know, I haven't seen anything built out there yet that can do that, but that's an approach that's probably going to get looked at and start built upon fairly soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll figure out a different way to charge.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have a pretty diverse environment. So
You do.
I would, in me personally, the way my brain works, I would prefer to keep things in the SIM, because then at least I know what's there. If I took the position that, you know, leave everything distributed and pull as needed, I don't think that would leave me feeling very comfortable.
It also really depends on what you use your SIM for, right? So for us, it's also a compliance tool and an audit tool, and something we can show to the regulator where you can say, look, 3 years ago, nothing happened. There's nothing to see here. At the same time, like, I personally believe we're never going to get all the data we need into the SIM anyway. Right? I'm not going to have every single malware file that I have on a system in the SIM. So I need both capabilities. I need to have the central logging for the important data that I actually take decisions on. Right? So it's the EDR alerts, it's whatever, proxy logs, whatever you want to stick into it that you use to alert on. And then I need to have the distributed data to actually get more information to enrich it. Like, I don't know, like, we don't pump all our web access logs into the SIM, because that would make Tim very rich.
Yep.
But it's something that if there's an investigation, that's what we need to look at. Right? So there's always going to be this two-tiered, maybe even three-tiered system for us.
Sure, yeah. I imagine all the audit D logs and NetFlow logs just going to... Tim's rich enough as he is, right? So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
good enough.
Let's not give him more money than he needs.
Yeah.
So we could spend all night talking about how rich I am. I would love that. I'm not, by the way. But we have to start to wrap things up, and I want to save a few minutes for audience questions. So where do you think we need to go as an industry to meet this AI moment? You know, we have adversaries with better than ever access to 0 days, better than ever access to writing malware, better than ever access to automating their malware campaigns. Heather, Bruce, Gotti, they call it an AI apocalypse. I don't know if I would use that word myself, but they use it. What do we need to do to meet the moment, and what should people listening to this, watching this, here in the audience, take away to meet that moment?
It's what did they say? Your palms got to be facing up. It's energy open. You have to really see what's coming. There's no single answer that you can give other than be adaptable, be aware, you know, pay attention. You got to talk to people. You got to go to conferences. You got to pay attention. Whatever best way for you is a podcast, whatever. to learn and see what's going on, and then go get that aha moment. That's for the future stuff. And at the end, behind the scenes, and these gentlemen know, you've got to understand what's going on in your company too. What's being worked on, what's being built, what are they growing in that area, and it's a huge social aspect to that. I think that's very important.
Okay, so a moment that would make many people do this, we actually have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can't freak out now.
Yeah.
You got to ride the wave. Yeah.
Fair point. So I think the collaboration thing is something that we as an industry have on our side, right? We have Chatham House Rules meetings, we have conferences that we can go to. The attackers don't necessarily have that. They might do, I don't know, North Korea and China, whatever might be collaborating. I'm not, by the way, if this is recorded, I'm not going to saying that that's true, right? But I think we have an advantage that we can actually share and learn from each other. Also, because even if we're in the even if I were working for BMW, right, I could talk to you about attacks that we're seeing because we're fighting the same enemy,
right.
And that's a good thing, and that's something we need to embrace, right? So I agree with you. It's energy open. It's open to the world, and being like water, I think was a good analogy before, right? You need to adapt, and adapting means embracing AI if the attackers are using it, trying to see where you can hit back. And I don't know what tomorrow looks like in the cyber world.
Yeah, great points. Collaboration is certainly a big key. We all probably have some amount of signal chats that keep us up all night with a couple hundred different colleagues. And having those relationships that you could reach out and call somebody and say, hey, we're seeing this. But I think fundamentally what you have to do is make sure you understand what's changing. And look at your current operation. I would bet that every one of them probably needs to change, right? You can't run your security operations like you did last year, because the world around you has changed. You have to be willing to accept that change, understand that change, and willing to change with it to continue to defend your companies.
The thing you said about a common adversary is something that really I think is special about working in security. If you're a PM at Google building a database, the bits are not working in the background to mess with your data layout. But adversaries are out there working day in and day out to make our lives difficult. And so as defenders, we have a unique enemy, and we have a unique circumstance in which we really can cross the aisle and work together, whether you're Ford or BMW, Allianz or Geico, AppLovin or I don't know who you compete with.
Nobody.
App hating.